Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our July iteration of the Innovation Connect, which is hosted by the Department of the Air Force Chief Data Office. I'm Colonel Ryan Kehoe, and I'm the Deputy Chief Data Officer for the SAF CO, and I will be today's moderator. The purpose of the Innovation Connect is to create a collaborative atmosphere for those working in the DoD to cross-pollinate our ideas across our respective organizations and to ultimately enhance innovation and identify and solve problems related to research and development and scaling. Last month, many of you attended our event, which we had an excellent presentation from Mr. Derek Eichen, who's one of our operations research analysts here in the Air Force CDO, and he gave a presentation on the Air Force's Project Brown Heron, or PBH. Today, we'll have two more exceptional presentations for you. First, we're excited to have Dr. Rajesh Naik, the Chief Scientist for the 711th Human Performance Wing, joining us today, and also from the Department of the Air Force Chief Data Office Vault Data Platform Team, the Chief Architect, Colonel Ernest Vasquez, and the Vault Data Platform Program Manager, Ms. Marlu Oswalt, and also their Operations Research Analyst, Ms. Chris Skilly, all presenting. In order to get started today, I'd like to set a few housekeeping rules. First, thank you for joining us. But if you're not a presenter today, we respectfully request you keep your camera off and your microphone muted to avoid any potential distractions during the individual presentations. And next, today, our speakers will provide you an overview of their topics with the follow-on Q&A session at the close of the event. Throughout the presentation, we encourage you to ask questions using the chat feature, but please keep your questions to the topics presented and refrain from any media-related questions or advertisements for your company or organization. We will then read questions out loud after the conclusion of both presentations. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our first presenter today, Dr. Rajesh Naik. Dr. Naik is a member of our senior executive scientific and professional cadre, and he is the chief scientist of the 711th Human Performance Wing at the Air Force Research Laboratory for Air Force Material Command at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. In this position, he provides technical vision and strategy for the wing's $300 million science and technology and defense health programs, and coordinates regularly with other Department of Defense organizations, as well as academic and industry partners. Dr. Naik's other responsibilities include serving as AFRL's Biotechnology Portfolio Lead, serving as the principal member of the NATO Human Factors and Medicine Panel, and he has also served as the Acting Chief Technology Officer for the Air Force Research Lab. Moreover, Dr. Naik also engages with DoD's biomedical, biotechnology, and Human Systems Community of Interest, or Reliance 21. And scientifically, Dr. Naik has research interests in biomaterials, nanotechnology, and biometrics with a focus on biosensing, bioelectronics, nanostructured materials, and protein engineering. He has published over 300 peer-reviewed articles, several book chapters, and has given over 150 plenary, invited, and keynote presentations at national and international events. And finally, he is also a co-inventor on 12 patents. Dr. Naik, we're excited to have you here with us today, and the floor is now yours.
Thank you so much, Colonel, for the kind introduction. Just do a sound check. Am I coming loud and clear? Over.
Yes, sir. We have you loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Well, appreciate the invitation and come to talk to you about the research at the 711 Human Performance Wing at the Air Force Research Lab and some of the data-driven approaches and challenges that we have within our organization. My intent is to sort of lay the groundwork on some of the technical work that we do, give you sort of that broad brush perspective, but then dig a little bit deeper, maybe peel the onion a couple layers back on a couple of technical areas where they're data intensive, where we have to bring in unique tools, both things that might be developed in-house, but mainly taking commercial tools and software to do analysis, visualization, among other things, to enable and advance the research projects that we have within the organization in things that we do related to the airmen and the space guardians. So, as you all know, with the stand-up of the United States Space Force, AFRL is one lab that serves both services. So in some places, apologies if you see Airman and you don't have the Space Guardian, we're still changing our slide decks and everything to reflect the one lab, two service mission. Can I have the next slide, please? The goal of the wing overall is to maximize both Airman and Space Guardian availability, how to enhance performance and optimize resource efficiency. That could be in terms of the human manpower resource, or also could be in terms of how we use our platforms and as well as our dollars. Our purpose is to ensure that the warfighter can execute the operational mission in any environment. And we see ourselves as a leader in Airman and Guardian health and performance. And we see that, I would say, we see ourselves in four lenses or four pillars. Is how do you enable the warfighter to carry out the mission, or how do you put them in the seat? How do you enhance their performance when they're in the seat? And then how do you sustain over long periods of time when you have operational stresses that can impact biological, cognitive, physical, physiological responses, and when things get broke, when the human element gets broke, how do you restore them to optimum levels? Again, the punchline is executing Airman and Space Guardian readiness to execute operational mission in any environment. Next slide, please, Ty. So, as with all organizations, we're driven by strategic, drivers and priorities. We are a little bit unique compared to some of the other technical directorates that you might be aware at AFRL, because we both support the line of the Air Force and the medical mission of the Air Force. So, especially supporting the Air Force Surgeon General when it comes to operational medicine, and her priorities are executed at the 7th Human Performance Wing. Where we execute the medical dollars to support the Surgeon General's needs. Many priorities, all the way from the National Defense Strategy, S&T 2030, the New Space Power Doctrine, as well as the Arctic Strategy. All of this talk about how do we enable and deliver, warfighting capabilities to ensure execution of the missions in those environments. But specifically from a wing perspective, what is that human in the loop or on the loop? What's that individual's role? How do we ensure we're integrating those individuals with the weapon systems, ensuring we're providing force protection, and also ensuring how do we take care of them if something goes wrong? How do we evacuate them out from the battle space, bring them to definitive care, whether it's in OCONUS or CONUS? Because we are responsible for the aerospace medical mission for the DoD through aeromedical evac and en route care. Next slide, please. So our core competencies are binned into four buckets. So AFRL has about 39 of the core competencies. They're foundational technical competencies, because we're an S&T organization that executes mainly 6.1 to 6.3 dollars. We're an S&T lab, so we engage in in-house research. We interact with external partners, whether it's academia, industry, to deliver capabilities for the current or the future fight. Most of our investments, I would say a large portion of our investments, I would say, is in the future fight area. And as such, there are lots of things that we do within the organization and across AFRL where we are investing in building foundational competencies to address those future needs. So, for example, we have a core competencies in training, where we can accelerate, enhance, and reduce cost of training to enable mission effectiveness in complex and evolving operation environments. Whether this is, whether we're talking about aircrafts, unmanned platforms, a space mission, how do you bring some cutting-edge technology? And how do you collect the data on the performance of those individuals in those environments and assess the performance and feed that back into the training loop, so you can tailor that on individualistic level rather than using a one-size-fits-all approach to training. So we're using things like AR, VR. We are capturing, data during training sessions through a platform that we have built here at AFRL that's now used across various match comps, as well as other collaborators of ours, where we can use that to develop proficiency-based approaches to training. Another area is in the area of bioeffects. This is how do we characterize the impact of the electromagnetic spectrum on the human, right? So looking at animal models, looking at what happens fundamentally at the cell level to all the way to systems. Lots of data that's collected, whether that's images, whether that is proteomics data, whether that is data regarding the test apparatus, all that is collected and needs to be integrated for us to be able to understand what's the impact, what is the threshold or sub-threshold values of some of the systems and the impacts or super threshold impacts, so we can enable and sustain the warfight in those environments, but more importantly, ensuring that we can develop the standards to allow or to acquire some of the systems in the inventory, or they can be operationalized. So, for example, the lasers on the Navy ship USS Ponce, the weaponeering of that and putting that on that platform onto the ship was enabled by some of the standards development we had developed within the organization to understand what is the collateral effect damages, what are behavioral models that we can develop, how can we characterize the data, analyze it when you use those weapon systems in the battle space. The third core competency is the medical and operational biosciences area. This is looking at the full spectrum of biomedical sciences. How can you optimize performance? How do you restore health and performance in degraded environments? How do you safeguard against various environmental stresses in those environments? So, for example, some of the things we've done recently through that core technical competence is actually supporting the Air Force and the DoD with the COVID-19 pandemic. Understanding, how can you use sequencing and other things at scale to rapidly test and to ensure readiness of our warfighters, but also using wearable devices. So some of you might have heard about the use of Aura rings and other things, which I'll talk to you on understanding the impact of what happens when someone might have some indicators of COVID. Can you use some of those wearable devices to assess, triage, and provide a commander or a medical provider an indication? They're not clinical diagnosis. We're not in clinical diagnosis here, but at least an indication of the severity of the symptoms, and can you manage and take care of our warfighters. And the final one is what we call adaptive warfighter interfaces. This is about developing interfaces where you can team humans with platforms. So what I have there is a picture of an operator who's looking at multiple screens. How to use human factors design to develop the appropriate screens, but also understand how is the human interacting with that system. How do you collect the data and then feedback to ensure effective integration of the human and that weapon system, whether that's an aircraft or if that's a cyber analyst sitting in front of a terminal looking at different screens and information, or an RPA operator or a UAV operator who might be, or unmanned operator who might be monitoring multiple assets and controlling multiple assets. How do you develop systems to enable seamless integration of the warfighter and the system? Next slide. So here's just a splattering of some of the S&T activities. I'm not going to go into details as much because of the interest of times. I'm going to touch on some of this, but some of the aspects I'm not going to be touching on today is things regarding personalized learning. How do you tailor approaches to develop more personalized approaches to train individuals rather than using calendar-based approaches? How can you use event-based approaches to train individuals, and using proficiency-based, more importantly, where you're training based on the proficiency level? And there is where we are collecting a lot of data, developing algorithms, so you can now be much more personalized in your approach on how you train and provide learning opportunities for this individual. In the area of brain-machine interface is where we're looking at understanding how the brain processes information. So lots of fMRI data, brain scans, and other things we collect. Stacks and stacks, gigabytes of data that's collected through that, put through machine learning algorithms, computer vision-based algorithms to understand which parts of the brains get activated during specific tasks. And then how can you now stimulate those parts of the brain to enhance memory learning in those individuals, as well as cognitive resilience. And then I will not talk about the DE by effects area as well. This is about, I already mentioned the electromagnetic spectrum on the humans. So let's go to the next slide, please. So, because of the broad mission of 7-Eleven, and the complexity of human performance and data, there are lots of things to measure in a human. You can take this, you can sort of extend this into the medical realm, although we're not talking of sick people here, we're talking of healthy people. But how do you use some of that same information to understand the status of the individual? And then not only the status of that single individual at different levels, all the way from the gene to behavior, but also to the mission data, right? What happens to an aircraft in those environments? How's the aircraft behaving? How do you integrate all that data? So just not even talking of the mission data, just the human data itself is much complex. They're multi-layered, and I'll touch upon some of those things. There's enormous processing requirements in this space because of the data sets that we're collecting, whether it's physiological data sets, performance data sets, biological data sets, and biological data sets have multiple layers to that. How do you do that in real time, right? Because things change over time, where we are dynamic, we respond to situations, and also making sure they operate over operationally relevant time scale. So again, very complicated because it's very different from what you would do in a clinic where it's static. You take blood samples, you say, okay, this is what's happening, or do some gene sequencing, and this might be what's wrong in this individual at this particular time, because you're looking at a single state. But what we're looking at is performance over extended periods of time and how that evolves. Having said that, because of just not the size of the data, but also some of the security consideration, because now you look at health information, personally identified information, there's also some security concerns here. Many of you must have read what's going on. The recent one was out of, I think, in the Economist, that talked about the Beijing Genomics Institute that has sequenced over 5 million pregnant women and collected all their genetic information. Now, that is, a trove of information that, our adversaries can use, not only understand what are the propensities for diseases, what is your susceptibility and other things that can be used just not in a civilian sector, but think about that, what are the military implications of that. Again, how do you ensure security of genetic information, which is very critical. Next slide, please. So let's talk about some of the data capture kind of things, right? So if I'm doing a research project, I get informed consent. We collect the data of the individual, get some demographics, some specific information of the individuals who are part of the informed consent. In most cases, in all cases, we identify the data because this is a research study. And then what we're doing is we're collecting lots of information. It could be urine samples, could be blood, could be saliva, could be putting wearable devices on those individuals, collecting physiological and performance data. This could be heart rate, this could be your gait, this could be your motion, it could be how many steps you're taking, could be things regarding your oxygen O2 levels. And then more biochemically or genetically, we're sequencing your DNA, we're getting information on the proteins, we're getting information on the metabolites, we're getting information on different small molecules that might be present in your breath, in your bloodstream. And we're collecting baseline, but we're also connecting information in what we call operational environments, right? We mimic that and put you through that and see how those things change. We collect samples over various times. So again, enormous amount of data so we can characterize the warfighter. And then we use that information to tailor how we do training, what kind of nutrition that needs to be provided to those individuals, how do you optimize performance, what is the responses to extreme environments, how do you develop appropriate force protection postures, what can you do in terms of cognitive and physical enhancement, how do you sustain performance in those environments, and also develop some countermeasures against fatigue. Next slide. So there are lots of tools that are commercially available, right? We're not building, here. There are existing tools, a couple of both DoD and non-DoD tools that we have access to that we've used. A recent one is Benchling, which is a commercial platform that allows you to ingest data from various experimental data sets, put it into what we call Benchling, The data is annotated, developed, the appropriate ontologist provided, and then it can be shared across many members across the DoD. So we have Army, Navy, all using some of those tools. We have other tools like SysBioCube, I think, which was actually developed by the Army, that we have access to as well, that allows you to ingest some of this biological data and use them just not from a research perspective, but also to enable you to develop, maybe down the road, better understanding of how you'd optimize performance of this individual. We do things like pattern recognition. We have a lot of heat maps and other things across different cohorts, across different conditions. We have some machine learning algorithms that we have developed. We're doing a lot of modeling, developing a digital twin of the human, which is very complex because they're not physics-based models like you would maybe build a digital twin of an aircraft engine and other things, which, they're very physics-based, math-based models, very different in a biological setting because it's much more complex. How do you use that to predict or develop model predictions, and as well as decision analytical tools as well? Next slide. So I know many of you might have taken biology in high school. Some of you might have forgotten, might have not have had a great experience with biology, but there's a thing called central dogma. How is your gene converted into RNA? Most of you must have heard of the RNA vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna, and how is that RNA then converted into a protein? Now, in each of these bins, you can actually capture data, right? So if I take a blood sample from an individual or cells from an individual, I can break open the cells, I can sequence, which is static, right? Is one single time point. I can sequence. A raw file is about 700 gigabyte. After I process it, it's 10 megabytes per one individual at one time point. Then if I want to know what are the transcripts, what are the mRNA molecules that's floating around that would make a protein or not make a protein, what do they look like? Again, a single time point, that's about, we're talking about, the transcript of 700 gigabytes and 10 megabytes. The genome is 150 gigabytes and processed is about 10, right? And then I want to know what proteins is present in your bloodstream. You can see the data requirements for that, right? And if I want to look at what are the metabolites at a single time point in an individual, whether that's through urine, breath, or other things, you can see that. Now, when I start collecting all this information, the raw files, that's huge, right? Not only do I need to be able to access those raw files, I want to also have backup requirements. Yeah, when I process it, I can sort of, compress the sizes because, a lot of information there are redundant or could be junk, and you clean up, right? But even for an individual, right, we're looking at orders of terabytes for just one single individual and could be for a single time point. Right? And yet we need to do experiments over a course of days or maybe weeks or even months or years, and we want to be able to capture all those information over time. And not only that, we want to be able to connect, the genome to the transcript to the protein to the metabolites, and also the physiological or biometric or anthropometric characteristics of those individuals. Next slide. So, data as a currency, it is a strategic asset, especially when you're looking at things related to the human and human performance in those environments. This is where adversaries are making huge investments in DNA sequencing, companies collecting information from wherever they can, because there's going to be insights you can get into an individual. The Russians are using what's known as genetic passports to actually select individuals for specific career fields. The US policy on that is we're not going to use genetic selection as a way to stratify individuals into certain career fields. However, we can understand what's the impact of those environments on individuals, so you can develop appropriate countermeasures or train them to overcome any deficiencies they might have in those environments. As I mentioned, dynamic data sets are things like transcriptomics, because RNA is produced over time. They're degraded, so it's not as static as opposed to the genome. All our genomes are one. That once you're born with it, that's your genes, that's it, right? But the other things that happen to the genome, they get imprinted, they make proteins, they're transcribed into mRNA. That's much more dynamic, and you have to use a multi-omic analytical approach to understand what's really happening into an individual, and just not a single time point over a variety of different time points. And I show that different layers, there are different stacks of data that you can actually collect on an individual, right? All the way from, what is the exposure of that individual to those environments, all the way to mission data, could be what we call multi-domain data, where you start fusing all these things together to help optimizing performance, enhancing performance, but also providing the appropriate care if things start to break over. Next slide, please. This is again breakdown of projected storage and processing needs. This is a highly data intensive work that's been done, and also not to mention there's some security, because people say, why don't we just use commercial sources and just send everything out, right? You can certainly do that. Lots of companies do that. Hospitals do that. But it's a little harder for us because there's clearly some huge security issues here, and that we have to be careful about. There are things we can do when it comes to de-identified data that we can sort of leverage commercial sources, but we want to make sure that we can maintain the appropriate security and the firewall that's needed to protect that information from getting into the wrong hands. So you can see what I need for a cohort that's 55 large, so 55 subjects over multiple time points that I want to collect data. You can see what's the amount. So we look at over 600 terabyte data that I collect on those individuals. So if you look at a 5-year projection of the study, you can see we're looking at petabytes of data that's needed to be able to carry out this kind of a project. And you might say, okay, why are we doing this? There's no need to do this, right? This is just way too much of a hurdle. The reason is, if we don't do it, our adversaries are doing this, right? We have to understand what is the impact of the future operational space on human performance and health, right? People say, okay, why are we going to NIH and leverage? NIH is looking at disease state. We're not looking at disease state. We're looking at normal performance and normal individuals and how they behave in those environments. Next slide. So what we're developing within AFRA, along with our partners, both industry, academia, but also with the appropriate vetted individuals, as well as our other DoD partners, is a collaborative approach on how we can leverage a central data resource, right? When you have a human subjects study, when you collect that data, you can go back to it and do some meta-analysis. You can get access to some of the samples. You can do your own experiments.
Okay, this is Colonel Kehoe. While we try and get Dr. Naik reconnected, I will take a moment to introduce our next team that's going to come up, and we will go from there. So next up, we have Colonel Ernie Vasquez and Miss Marlu Oswalt, and also Mr. Chris Gilley joining us from the Department of the Air Force. Colonel Vasquez is the Director of Operations and the Chief Vault Data Platform Architect for the Department of the Air Force's Chief Data Office. And he has also served as the Acting Deputy Chief Data Officer and as the Senior Liaison Officer. In his current capacity, he assists the Department of Air Force Chief Data Officer in designing and driving data management strategies to include governance, quality, and data architecture. He drives innovation by shaping vision and industry best practices to execute new data-driven insights while breaking down data silos and challenges to ensure alignment across the DAF data enterprise. He builds relationships with the department's counterparts to align data management strategies and investments that support data management leaders. He also provides the data platform for discovering new technologies to make use of data analytics, data science, data management, and the digital transformation journey. Ms. Oswalt is the Vault Data Platform Program Manager. Ms. Oswalt currently leads the Vault Platform team in delivering and maintaining the Vault Data Platform for SAF CO. The Vault Data Platform team consists of the Dev team, an Ops team, and an EIM data acquisition team supported by an integrated cybersecurity team. The Vault Data Platform team completes work through agile two-week sprints. Yes, Dr. Naik, we have you loud and clear.
Yeah, can get my slides back up?
Yes, sir. While we're pulling your slides up, I have just a few more sentences about the next guest that we're going to bring up, and then we'll turn it back over to you.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Yes, sir. And as you will see from their upcoming Vault Data Platform presentation, they provide users with the ability to perform machine learning and visualization on an extensive data set contained within the Vault Data Platform data lake. So with that, let's go back to Dr. Naik. It looks like we have him back up on voice, and we will finish up his presentation and then go back to the data platform.
Apologies, we have, yeah, Ryan, you can hear me, right?
Yes, I got you loud and clear.
Yeah, sorry, the thunderstorms here, and I think that's why I lost connection with my government computer, so I'm on my iPad. So if we drop again, I will try and connect via phone. So let's go to the next slide. I think I just have a few more slides and I should be wrapping up here pretty soon. So here's another way of looking at it, right? So this is a way that we have a project here where we take cells from individuals, warfighters in this case, and can grow a brain cell or a heart cell or develop an organ, and then, you know, understand what is the impact of operational environments due to that organ. So we collect images, so we have microscopy data, but then we do all the omics and other things that I've mentioned to you earlier on, whether it's genomics, proteomics, metabolomics. We collect that all information on what we call omics analysis to maybe understand what's the impact of hypoxia, right? Who is susceptible, who is resilient, and then how can we use that information to create a human digital twin to develop predictive and more personalized augmentation strategy to overcome some of the challenges or some of those issues individuals might face in those environments. Again, what are the molecular underpinnings for performance enhancement? Yeah, we might be talking about pilots, but there are also other mission sets that we're certainly interested in. Arctic is one that we'll begin to look is what's the impact of extreme environments on human performance and how can you overcome that? Why are some individuals more resilient in colder environments or have higher cold tolerance as opposed to others? There's specific genes that have been identified in people who live in Tibet and other areas. Also, what's in the gut? They've seen that there's microbes in the gut actually that provide some kind of a cold tolerance to individuals. So all that information is what we're very interested in. Next slide, please. And you can take this, you know, one step ahead is now I've taken all the human data, but then I'm collecting also the weapon system data. And how do I integrate that, right? To get, I would say, a weapon system view into what's really happening. And this is where true human machine teams are built, right? Understanding how human behaves in those environments, how is the machine behaving, and how can you toggle responses both by the human and the machine based on the conditions. So if there's degraded performance of the human or the machine, you know, how do you, you know, shift responsibilities between those two assets that you have, right? You know, how do you develop the tools and manage and access of this multi-source data lake that we have to be able to tap into and use in how not we just do research, but also how do we develop future platforms for the DoD. Next slide. So it's about digitizing the human, right? That's pretty much what the bottom line is. And I just want to give you a quick example of what we have done in an area that might be of interest to this audience is taking signatures, whether that is physiological, cognitive signatures of individuals, digitizing that so I can have a better understanding of what is the human's status in those environments and how do I really build a human machine team. So let me give an example here. So you see an individual there in a confined space wearing a breathing mask because you're sending them to an environment that has a lot of fumes. That's a fuel tank, that's a wing of a fuel tank, and that individual goes into those spaces, cleans up, you know, so that there's no clogging of the issues in those fuel systems. Most of this requires one maintainer for every one observer for every maintainer. What we have been doing is fitting those individuals, those maintainers, with wearable devices, so we can pull out physiological performance data. You know, what's their breathing rate looks like, what's their O2 levels look like, what's their heart rate. How do I now, you know, intervene if there are issues that the individual might be facing in those environments? How do we use things like AI, machine learning, and signal processing to digitize the information, and then develop the appropriate prevention, detection, or mitigation strategy as we monitor the performance of those individuals? Next slide. So we've been doing a lot of work with commercial vendors. This is an area that there are lots of people developing various devices, whether it's the Oura Ring, the Polar chest strap, EEG, and other things. Using some of those devices, collecting information from those individuals, integrating that. We're talking of megabytes, gigabytes of data from individual, depends on how you're monitoring those individuals, along with maybe in this case, we look at aircraft information too, especially when we're doing physiological monitoring in the cockpit. We also look at air quality in the cockpit. We look at aircraft performance, pulling all that data together to better understand what's really going on. So in the process of doing this, next slide, we developed a system known as ADAPS. It's an Airman Data Analyst and Performance and Tracking System. This is based on the SmarterBase platform, which we can ingest data from various devices. If you can go to the next slide, actually go 2 slides down, if you don't mind, in the interest of time. Let's skip this one, where we can ingest data from all different various, whether it's wearable devices, smartphone apps, third-party apps, Android, tactical kits, and ingest that into the system. It can be housed, aggregated, it's connected to the Gov Cloud. It's PII, PHI, HIPAA compliant. It requires CAC card authentication. That you can bring in some AI and machine learning tools into this environment. And this provides the commander with some operational decision-making ability. Has information on real time and on unit readiness. We've been using this with the special ops. There are about 5,000 individuals who use this across the special warfare units for risk injury production. How do you develop training, load forecasting in those individuals? We've been using this for some COVID-19 symptom monitoring as well as contact tracing. And it also provides some feedback to the warfighter in terms of alerts, intervention recommendations, other real-time physiological assessment on the performance of those individuals through an app that can be loaded onto an Android or an iPhone. Next slide, please. So the holy grail, if you would ask me, is how do you really create a human digital twin that we can integrate with the weapon system and look at, what is the performance of those individuals? What is the advantage of having the human, on the loop or completely out of the loop, right? How do you develop realistic simulation outcomes? Because right now, so the simulation outcomes are just based on kinetic effects, right? It's bullet on bullet, really does not bring in the human dimension or insights into any wargaming. Our idea would be is to develop a human digital twin so we can introduce that to some of our MS&A capabilities, right? How can you develop models to understand what is the impact of those environments? How do you develop appropriate mitigation strategy? So it's again, it's representing the human in that digital space. But for that, you need a library of human functions and attributes that you can introduce. So we're building that in collaboration with our partners at Air Force Futures, as well as within AFRL, and as well, I think, other parts of the Air Force on building what we call a human digital twin. Next slide. But at the bench level, if you talk to people, right, you say, what are your biggest pinch points? They will tell you, so this is just based on some of the work that we've done internally, some of the challenges that we face. How do you pull data from a computer that's hooked onto to an instrument? You cannot, because of the restrictions, you can't really connect to that. How do you then pull that in, ingest that into your DREN network? How do you use government resources, whether this is, you look at high performance computing assets, and then how do you collaborate with others, right? So there are some existing solutions. There are some solutions that we need, right, to overcome some of these barriers, right? How do you work with the tri-service partners to be able to sort of tap into their data sets? We have collaborative projects. We still have huge challenges about sending files back and forth for all different differences in how we deal with our IT infrastructure. So again, some of this is just a snapshot on some of the challenges, right? There's some severe restrictions, some moderate restrictions, and I would say minimal restrictions, right? International collaborators to work with academia or small business using, commercial platforms, very easy. But then when we want to connect with them, can be a little bit of a challenge. But with COVID-19, some of those things the barriers have been lessened. So again, I would say a silver lining from a terrible situation that we and the world is facing is that we have been able to overcome some of those challenges by providing, whether it's Zoom Gov as an example, or Air Force Teams or chess or other things that we have, is allowing us now to connect, share things much easier than we could previously. Oh, next slide. I'll leave the slides with you. This is just some capabilities that we have that we use internally, some of the things that we would like to do. But I think more important is in the following slide, I have, what are some of our big rocks or data infrastructure needs that have been identified through a summit that was led by Chief Engineer Mark Doriso. Next slide, please. That talks about, what do we need in terms of analytics infrastructure? How do we manage search data? What is the appropriate lab management tools, electronic lab notebooks, and infrastructure that's needed? How do you share data inside and outside of AFRL? Doing statistics, analytical dashboard and reporting, so on and so forth, right? So those are some of the things that we have collected internally as things that we think are big rocks for us that we need to work on to be in the 21st century as we look at digital transformation of our enterprise. I think I should stop there. I have 2 more slides, but I think this is a good place to stop. One of the example I had in a slide that's a couple of slides down is we had to pivot to support COVID-19. Had to develop some modeling tools and other things, and there were some huge challenges there because we're using GovCloud and we had to access some databases that became a little bit of a challenge. You can go to the next slide. It just shows you a snapshot of our modeling tool. Really a fantastic tool that was developed in-house, but there was some challenges that we had to overcome. But this was a nice collaboration amongst multiple partners on building this dashboard. With that, I'll stop and turn it over to you, Ryan. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Naik. We do have some questions, but we will save those for the end. And we've gone over our introductions for the Vault Data Platform team. So with that, Colonel Vasquez, I'll turn it over to you and your team. Go ahead, over.
Thank you for having me here today. I really appreciate the opportunity today to talk about the Vault Data Platform. It is a very dynamic and fun place to work, so to speak. So I wanted to kind of present today what the Vault Data Platform is and what we are doing and adding to the platform. I want to try to keep my presentation a little bit short because last time Mr. Gilly and I did this presentation, I went long and he had like 0 minutes. So I'm going to breeze through some of these. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them in chat and we will get them answered. So Vault Data Platform, the real beauty of the Vault Data Platform is the ability for people to come in and use various tools that we supply on the Vault to be able to get to the data that we have in our Vault Data Platform data lake, for people to be able to come in and do machine learning visualizations with the different tools and really to get an understanding and provide some answers that individuals across the Air Force have. So one of the great things that we do with the Vault is any of the data that we bring into the Vault, we allow users to get to. We treat the data as a DAF enterprise resource. And so when you come in as a tenant is a group of people. So when you come in as a tenant on the Vault, you basically have access to any of the data that we have within the Vault data lake so that you can understand and ask questions of that data. And then on top of that, as I mentioned, we have tools that allow you to do those things. So in a couple of slides, I'm going to go through kind of the tooling that we have currently available. The Vault is a very dynamic platform. And what I mean by that is that we are continuously bringing in new products that we have decided that we need to bring in. We have a bring your own tool process so that an individual or a group can say, hey, look, I have a need for this other tool that does something different or doesn't currently exist within the Vault. And so we have a BYOT process where people can request and have different software deployed out to the Vault. And then we are constantly going out and working on getting additional data acquisition, so to speak, so that we have continued and updated data within our data lake. So it really is a platform meant for people to be able to get to the information they need, do some machine learning, and really get to those things that they want to learn about data within the Air Force. I'll go through this one quickly. The Vault Data Platform really was started in July 2018. In January 2019, we had our first NIPR deployment. In August of 2019, we did a SIPR deployment. And since then, we have been pretty much continuously adding capabilities in the form of tools and additional data that people are able to access and use. And so we have a very dynamic user community and very dynamic additions to the Vault. So we do provide the ability for people to do everything from ingesting, which we take on the ingest portion of it to get information into our data lake. And I'll kind of go through that in a couple of slides. But when the data is then in the data lake, you will have access to it. You will also have access to what is your private tenant bucket. And so if there is additional data that you want to have in that private tenant bucket, you're absolutely able to do that and then combine it with the tools that we have for being able to kind of do that machine learning that you want. The only thing that we currently do a little bit differently, we do have a PIA in place, which enables us to have PII and PHI in the Vault. And so because we have PII and PHI, those particular assets within our enterprise data lake aren't available to everyone. There's a process that you have to go through to request access to PII. But our PIA does allow us to have PII within the Vault. So we do have a ServiceNow process where you can go about requesting access to PII buckets and gaining access to those. So we do have tools in place that allow you to do your data manipulation, create data sets, really kind of wrangle and get after the data itself, bring that data together to be able to then move into being able to do those visualizations and those analytics. So this slide kind of shows a lot of the different tools that we have available. So we do on a request basis have it's got an enterprise tool. We have Databricks. We also have Tableau that you can request. Both of those do require either licenses or DBUs. And so we work with you in that process. Again, we have an automated process where you can request those tools. But we also have the ability for people to use Apache Zeppelin notebooks to write Python code, to write R code. And then we have various other kind of tools that are available This slide hasn't even been updated. We most recently added Qlik Sense. And so it's another tool that you are able to use. So we do have data out in our data bucket. We catalog all of that information. We are currently going through a pilot on how we are going to present that catalog to make it easier for people to interact with the data within the vault. And then we do keep all of our metadata both in Apache Atlas and in Axon. So we have a really robust system that has been around for a while, and we just continue to add to it. As I mentioned, we have kind of the overall system. The system in NIPR is at IL4, and so people are able to bring in IL4 and IL5 data into the system, and PII and PHI. When you come into the vault, you're basically going to CAC in through through our F5, and you'll be presented with a web top. And from there, you're able to go through and access all of the tools and kind of explore the data lake. When we do data acquisition, so when you're in the vault, you can request from us through another process that you would like us to go out and look for or acquire maybe data that isn't yet in the vault. And so when you do that, it kicks off a process. We go work with those organizations. And then when we bring it into the vault, we run it through a series of EIM processes that allow us to take it from our transient bucket, run it through some processes, both with NiFi and our MSB, to capture the metadata that we need, that we then keep in Atlas and Axon, and then move it from our raw data. We do a little bit of manipulation from our raw data to our trusted bucket. And then once that data is in the trusted bucket, you have access to that data, both as Hive tables and as kind of the raw data as we get it from the organizations. As I mentioned, we have a lot of persistent inbound and outbound feeds. And so, this slide continuously gets updated, but we do get lots of data from lots of different places. If you need some more information about what we have, feel free to reach out and we can provide you with that information. Software services, I can go through this really quickly, but a lot of these are, capabilities that we currently either have in NIPR or SIPR, and some of the larger capabilities that we have on our roadmap. We do have a Plotly Dash server, and we also have a Shiny server, so that as people are developing different applications, we can go ahead and post those or put those in each of those servers and have those dashboards or applications available to users to be able to kind of see the results of the work that has been done. This one I'll kind of skip through. It's a lot of the back-end things. We do have a lot of things on our roadmap. Like I said, we are a pretty dynamic platform. In addition to the continued data acquisition and the continued BYOT that we are doing, we are also instituting some ABAC controls, attribute-based access controls, to enable a finer grain resolution for providing or not providing access to users. We're working on APIs and data federation with other platforms within the Air Force, so that we're able to provide you with kind of that data catalog that you can see where that data is, and then have APIs or other kinds of federation that we're discussing to really go and make that data available to you. So, I don't need to go through all of these things. Streaming data is coming soon. JWICs, we are just starting our JWICs build out. And so by the end of the year is where we are pushing to get the JWICs capability out there. So a lot of good things going on within the vault. When you come into the vault, so the first thing you will do, we have an automated process that you can request an account on the vault. That will set you up with a user account. It's an auto-provisioned user account. So as long as you have your CAC and can get to the URL on NIPR, then you can go ahead and do that. After that, you request a tenant, or you request to be part of a tenant. And that is also an automated request that happens. And then we get the right approvals tools to add you to a particular tenant. We have kind of two cost models right now. We have the tenant light, which provides you with the ability. You'll have kind of the web top, and you'll have the ability to to look through the data lake, and you'll also be able to get to Databricks. We have some customers that really are wanting to use Databricks. Then we have a full tenant that really provides you with the ability to use all of the tools within the Vault tool set. And so we're looking at going to kind of a chargeback model. I know there are still some questions about what that chargeback model is going to be, but we are, currently there is no cost. In the future for a tenant, not for a user, there will likely be for a full tenant, a cost for that. We do have Ask Me Anywheres, just so everybody is aware, Ask Me Anythings twice a month. So we kind of go through these same slides and allow people to ask questions. So SAF does have the ability to help with different licensing for the different tools that do need licensing on the Vault. So we can kind of talk through that a little bit. And then when you get into the Vault, this is kind of what your landing page is going to look like. You're going to see lots of different tools that you are able to access. And then once you click on one, you can go down into like the S3 browser with Hue, or get to the data catalog, or get to any of the tools. So the rest of my slides are kind of more around just, going through the different tools and the opening slide for that. But I did want to put up this Ask Me Anywhere session. It's the second Tuesday of the month, or the fourth Wednesday of the month. And we would love for anyone and everyone to attend. All right, Colonel Vasquez, are you on? Did you want to add anything?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. I had an issue with my hotspot, but I'm in now. So thank you, Marlu. That's why we have great redundancy within the team. So several of us can brief this. So good afternoon, folks. Colonel Ernie Vasquez here. And as Marlu just went through here, we have really just tremendous capability in this platform. And under Ms. Verdreen's leadership, the DAF CDO, and of course, my predecessor, Colonel Chuck DeStefani, this, was stood up. We've been doing this for over about 3 years and a few months. Okay, so this is not a new capability. We were one of the first ones to get it out there, and every day we add more capability to it. So it's an enterprise-wide type of platform. And again, it's a very agile platform. And as you can see, it's a very modern platform that we mimic industry and the things that we're doing on there with the tools that we use and those type of things. But at the same time, we also have our change control boards and those type of things. So governance is definitely a part of this, obviously, but we're very agile in how we can get things deployed and get them out there for folks to use and give you that capability that you're looking for. So some of the slides that Marlu just went through can show you what, the tool sets that are out there, how we ingest data, how we procure data, et cetera, how we cleanse data, all those type of things, all those best practice tools are available out there for our user community. And in addition, obviously we're on NIPR and we're on SIPR, but the JWICS piece is huge because that community has been asking for that for a while. We know there's some other platforms that have that, but when you look at a data platform and what they're asking for and the tool sets that will be in there, that's what we're building out right now, as Marlu has mentioned. So lots of capability. The use cases, which Chris Gilley is going to talk about next, is really what data problem are you trying to solve, right? You go to Chris and Colonel Ron Sinikowski's team and ask them, hey, I want to have a use case to see, we have this data problem we want to try to solve. We have a bunch of spreadsheets and we have a bunch of, unstructured data that we want to get, some kind of format to and get it in a way where we can make decisions on data in a centralized environment where everyone can access it, right? So they do that type of stuff. He'll talk more about that. But again, when you look at folks like AFI-MSC, who has this throughout every single installation in the Air Force, right? Where you can look at facilities, though that's the type of capability we bring to commanders, to people out in the field, right? So it's not just headquarters staff. You're talking about folks out in the field, civil engineers, et cetera, that say, hey, I need to know the state of my flight line, for example, and they can see that at a moment's notice with visualizations and the data that have been made available and on this platform, right? So a lot of a great capability. We've been doing it for a while. We're very good at it, right? So if you have those questions and those type of things, we do have the AMA, the Ask Me Anything sessions twice a month, where we can get down into the weeds and answer your questions. You're like, well, do you do this? Do you do that? Those type of things, right? And we can really get into the weeds, because this is just a very high level type of a briefing that we're giving here, but we really get down. And if you're going to get your technical people in there, we can bring our technical people in there as well and have those discussions on what you're looking at for capability on this platform. So that's all I have. Thank you, Marlu, very much for presenting. And I believe we have Mr. Chris Gilly next that's going to talk about use cases and what we do on the platform with that. Over.
Thank you, sir. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Marlu. And, yep. Thank you, Marlu and Colonel Vasquez. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Loud and clear.
Great. Go ahead and share my screen. Let me know when it comes up here. Are you all able to see my screen? Should see a PowerPoint up.
Got it.
Great. So again, thank you, Marlu and Colonel Vasquez. My name is Chris Gilly. I'm an Ops Research Analyst here at SAF-CO, working on our data capabilities team. I kind of support a couple of facets of the work we do here at SAF-CO, one being use cases, as Colonel Vasquez mentioned. As part of that team, we take on use cases from across the Air Force. Offices bring us problems, and we help stand up some data analytics capability for people who might not otherwise have that or have not used that kind of capability in the past. So if you have an interesting use case, or if you and your organization need some help, I encourage you to reach out to us and see if we have some bandwidth to stand up a use case for you. But aside from use case work, we also help support the Vault platform and our excellent teammates over at the platform team. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of a sample use case to, one, show you the capabilities on Vault, but also really demonstrate the tools and jump into the tools to give you a little bit better understanding of how they play together and how they can be used. Before we do that, Colonel Kehoe or Tanisha, how much time do you want me to take here? Well, I'll try to keep it short. I know it's getting towards the end of the day here.
I was going to say, I wasn't sure if Ty was going to chime in. So we're scheduled to go till 4 o'clock, but we want to leave time for Q&A. So I would say probably 30 minutes or so.
Great. Yeah, and I'll try to keep it a little briefer than that, since I know this is still part of our last one. But so as I said, I'm going to jump through just kind of a sample use case here. As you can see on this PowerPoint slide, we're just going to do something really simple, and we're going to go after the MPES dataset, which is a manpower dataset, and try to count number of civilians and number of military authorizations across grade. And as I said, this will give us a kind of a basic understanding of how to use the different tools on Vault and how they can help answer questions. So at the end of this, what we really want to be able to do is, as I said, jump into that MPES dataset, which is a dataset available on Vault, and build out really simple visualization, maybe a couple of bar graphs like what you see here at the bottom of the screen that tells me, hey, I've got 1,000 airmen, basic airmen across the Air Force, and 2,000 GS-12s. So the beauty of the Vault, or one of the beautiful things about the Vault, is its flexibility. There's lots of tools on the platform which can be used concurrently or in any kind of order arrangement as you please, kind of across the use case pipeline. Here we start just kind of visualizing this. We go from ingesting of the data, storing, munging, the really fun stuff, data cleaning, manipulation, and building out the experimentation. And then finally jumping into visualization and analytics. I'm going to show just how to use a few of these different tools. So kind of running through the use case process. First, using Hue to view the data, Trifacta to clean it, and then Tableau and Plotly Dash to visualize it. And then we'll kind of do something similar within Databricks as well. You all see my desktop or my web tab open? You should see the Vault Data Platform right there.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, yes.
Great, awesome. So when you first hit the Vault, you should see the landing page here. But once you log in, as Marlou mentioned, you'll see a screen kind of similar to this. Each of these drop downs is a tenant space. So you can see we have tenants from across the Air Force. And as a member of SAFCO, I have access to these various tenant spaces. But if you're new to the platform, when you jump in, you won't see all of these tools. You'll see a couple. But the first thing you want to do is go down to the bottom, click on Help Desk and Requests, and open up our Help Desk. When you hop over to the Help Desk, you'll see a screen like this, and this is where you can request access to various tenant spaces or to various applications. So if I click on that, you can see some of the applications that require additional access. Things like Databricks and Tableau and Trifacta are pretty popular, and these aren't included standard, so you do have to come in here and request access to the application individually. But you can also check out some other things. We have a knowledge base, for instance, where myself and several of our other teammates publish articles and how-tos. So certainly come in here and you can search around if you want to know how to upload a file into Hue and into S3, if you're having issues installing a package, or if you want kind of more in-depth information about how to create a Plotly Dash application. This is a great resource. Certainly encourage you to check this out. So once you're into the platform and you have access to a tenant space and some tools, we're just going to hop right in. So as I said, we're going to start with Hue to explore the MPES data set. And I've already opened up Hue here, and I'm going to toggle through our S3 data sets. And here you can see some of the various data lake buckets that are available. Some of these are probably familiar to you, Geo81, PMRT, MPES. As I said, this is the one we want to go after. So I'm going to go ahead and open up MPES and open up into our file folder. Now, myself and some of my teammates have already done the hard work of figuring out which data sets we want to go after, which is often the first step. If you didn't get to see Mr. Eichen's presentation at the last Innovation Connect about using Envision, this is an excellent tool. We use this to kind of get a better understanding of some of the data sets before we really do some of our hard analysis on the platform. But you can certainly do a lot of that exploration here within Hue. But I already know from that exploration that we need a few of these files, namely this PAS, this PAS, PAS, and RIC file. This is going to contain the information we need in order to count number of civilians, number of airmen by grade, airmen and guardians by grade. Here I can see a version of the MPES data set in just kind of its very bare bones basic form, but I know that this is what we're going after. So now that I've seen this in Hue, if I really wanted to, I could keep playing around with this in Hue. It's a pretty powerful tool. Here I created a couple tables where I just imported those couple files and joined them together. And I can even build visualizations here. I'm not going to demonstrate that for the purposes today, but it's just something to keep in mind. But let's say I look at this PAS file, and I can already tell that it's going to be a little unclean. There's lots of quotation marks. I'm not sure that this is exactly how I want this data set to look like before I can drop it into create visualizations. As I mentioned, one of the tools you can use to do that munging step, that data cleansing step, is Trifacta. So I'll go ahead and open up Trifacta here. Trifacta is built on what it calls recipes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a new recipe here. Well, before I do that, actually, I'm going to go ahead and import data because I want these data sets. And you can already see that I have access to that same bucket that we saw over here in Hue, this MPES transient data set. I can do that. I can grab that same folder here within Trifacta, and I can add those same exact files that we needed. And once I import those, I can create a recipe, which is where I'm going to do these transformation steps to clean up the data. So here you can see my data sets on the side. I'm going to join them into a recipe, and I'm going to do a little bit of my cleaning. As you can see, this is a little bit cleaner view, kind of more Excel format for looking at the data instead of looking at it just in this very basic form in Hue. But I can already tell, like I said, there's some cleaning steps I need to do. For instance, I want to trim all these quotes off these columns. I know I'm going to convert a row to a header. And most importantly, I'm going to do some of these joins with these other two data sets that I had to get some additional information specifically about where these authorizations are attached. And once I've done these cleaning steps here, one of the powerful things about Trifacta is it will suggest a lot of these for you. and it's a low-code environment. So instead of having to have lots of analysts who know how to use Python or R, you can come into a tool like Trifacta, and let's say, you know, I want to get rid of these quotes. I can highlight them here. And Trifacta will actually provide automated suggestions. But as I said, once I've done my cleaning steps and I've got it ready to go, here you can see we've already sorted down civilians by grade and count. Important thing to note here is Trifacta is just using a snippet of the data. It's not working on the full data. I only have about 10 megabytes of it here. But once I've got an idea of what it should look like and sort it out, I'm going to go ahead and run this as a job and put this clean data set back into my tenant space. So that way I can continue using it down the line in a tool like Plotly Dash or Tableau. It's simple enough to run the job and put it back here. So now that I've cleaned the data, I've got a couple options. I can either create my visualization in a tool like Tableau, or I can do something within Databricks as well. For sake of keeping it kind of simple, I'm also going to show you how to do those cleaning steps within Databricks. If you're familiar with Databricks, or if you're not familiar with Databricks, it's a coding environment, a notebook environment, not dissimilar to Jupyter Notebooks or Zeppelin. We've already gone ahead and created a notebook here where we've pulled in these same data sets again. Of course, we've done some imports, but you'll notice again, we're going after these same files, this PAS, POS, and RIC file, and we're going to bring those in here to the notebook and do our cleaning steps with them. Of course, there's many different ways we can do this. We can do it with Spark SQL, which is a SQL wrapped in Python, or I can do it within Python. So one of the beautiful things about Databricks is it allows you this kind of flexibility here. And I'm going to do a lot of those same things that we did before, which you saw in Trifacta, right? We're going to do a couple joins. We're going to clean down the data set a little bit. In order to use this data set in Tableau later, we can actually save it straight into a data table, which can be read from Tableau since there's a connector between Databricks and Tableau, which is a great feature. And again, we're going to perform some of these same steps where we identify our civilians and we identify our military members based on a few keys in the data. Do a quick group by and count, so that way we know how many of them there are. And now we can build out some of our visualizations. One of the other great benefits of Databricks is this display function, which gives me a lot of some of the very basic visualization tools right off the bat. So instead of having to go through and use a package like Matplotlib to build a bunch of these out, I can call this display, and I'm already given a lot of functionality as far as how I want to view this. For instance, I can switch back and forth between a plot and a data frame. I've got lots of options here. This kind of should look familiar if you've ever used pivot tables in Excel, but there's a lot of functionality here as well. And this is what we were looking for, right? So we could stop here. We could give access to this notebook to some senior leaders and say, hey, here's the current state of the authorizations across the DAF. But sometimes we want to make it a little prettier. So we have a few options, one being Tableau and one being, or the two that I'll hit today are Tableau and Plotly Dash. Since we have this open, I'll go ahead and hit Plotly Dash first. So here we do a little bit more cleaning, some preparation before we can pass this data frame into Plotly Dash. Here just converting it to pandas and doing a few other things like that. And the actual code for the Dash app is relatively concise. Here we're just calling a few different graphs, right? A few bar charts and a sunburst. And I can actually show you what this looks like once we pull it up. So this is rendered within Databricks, and it actually prints out a URL for me to go and look at this online. So I can do a lot of testing here, and now we can see these the same bar charts that we saw in Databricks, but a little more cleaned up, and we can obviously edit colors and fonts and things like that. So we have some pretty basic visualizations for that question we were trying to answer. If I was happy with this the way it was, I could actually pass this code off to our platform team and say, hey, I've built out this Dash app. It's ready to be deployed, and I can pass along the code. And do a little bit of work with our platform team, and they'll actually get it posted on our Plotly Dash server. So I would show you if I was back on the VPN. But we have a public server for both Plotly Dash apps and our Shiny applications. where once you've done your development work, you can actually post them here. And again, anybody who has access to the platform could come and look at your cleaned up, excellent visualization, whether that's senior leaders or teammates. It's a great tool there. So that's a Plotly Dash visualization there. And of course, you can also do this kind of work within Tableau. As I said, you can actually connect Tableau to Databricks. We're also working on standing up the connection between between Trifacta and Tableau. So instead of having all these intermediary steps, you can, pass your clean data along right as you're working on it. But here, I'm going to go ahead and pass in that data set that we saw over here in Databricks, and I'm just going to pass it straight into Tableau. Well, Tableau has locked me out a little bit, but I do still have the application over. So here we've built out a very similar visualization to what we had over in Plotly. Again, grade code count by grade. Here we can see our civilian grades, and here we can see our military grades. And again, another kind of simple sunburst chart, which shows the same information that we saw in Dash. So with that, I'll go ahead and stop there. And I think we'll go ahead and open up the floor for questions. Thank you.
This is Colonel Vasquez again. Thank you, Chris. Fantastic demo there. So folks, as you can see, the capability that's out there. And of course, I know we have a very wide audience. Some folks are coders and very technical, and some are not, right? So we're not trying to make everybody into a data scientist or a data analyst, but a lot of these tools are very intuitive and easy to learn. And when you have the low code or no code type of applications out there, that's who they're targeting, right? Folks that don't know really how to code, right? So if you know how to code, that's fantastic, right? Then you can start using Python and some of the other features that are there. But if you do not, it makes it a little easier that it kind of writes the code for you, so that you can get the capability you're looking for, whether it's a visualization, whether it's looking at that data that you want to bring in, and ensuring that the data is cleansed and trusted, and all the other things that we talk about, right? So you can just kind of see how Chris went through. I know we went through it kind of quickly, but that shows you just a sample of what the capability is with the tool sets that we have deployed in the environment. And with that, Colonel Kehoe, I think, or Ty, I think we can open it up for questions.
Yes, thank you, Colonel Vasquez, Ms. Oswalt, and Mr. Gilly. Great presentation. And now let's go into Q&A session. And we have several questions that have come in, and I'll start to read those, and we'll go over to Dr. Naik first. So, Dr. Naik, the first question for you is your data primarily being used diagnostically? Are there any examples where this data can be used to prescribe a change that would benefit an airman or the Air Force?
Yeah, it depends. There are where the data has been used to change training regimen, has been used to improve training, as well as identify cohorts that are a little more susceptible to certain environmental stressors. So not just as a diagnostic tool, but also implementing changes into how we take care of our folks, or how we train our folks. Over.
Okay. And next question we had was, we saw that you collaborate with other organizations within the Air and Space Forces, but what about through the rest of the DoD community? Do you have any current or pending partnerships in the works?
Yes, we do have partnerships with both the Army and the Navy, as well as through what we call the larger community of interest. So there's the OSD Reliance 21 activities that we collaborate with other services through joint road mapping activities, but also developing joint programs and putting in joint proposals to OSD and other entities. So we have, I would say, about 3 very strong collaborative projects, one with the Army, ARL, one with the Navy at NRL, and one with the Native Soldier Center. Over.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another question for Dr. Naik. We saw that you are collecting data points for your research, but are you also pulling from existing databases?
Yes, in some cases we can, but not all of the data that's available out there, especially with human subjects, are applicable. They're not very clean. They don't have the level of information that's needed to annotate appropriately. We do a lot of, use a lot of the genomic and proteomics data websites, mass spectroscopy data websites that are all commercially available, and also some open sources. We certainly use that. But given our focus and how we are collecting data under very defined conditions, those data sets are not easy to come by, right? There are some biological data sets that are things that we use on a regular basis. But when it comes to connecting them to certain performance and operation environments, those data sets are very unique. Over.
Okay, the next question was, are there difficulties with using the digital twin tech in the field if you have degraded comms?
So we have not gotten that far yet. I would assume so, but I would expect that most of the digital twin uses will be done operational. And once you're in the operation environment, you might be doing some monitoring. And yes, a lot of things are going to be sent over the air. We are going to have issues with degraded comms. But then how do you use other platforms, autonomous platforms, ability to collect data and send when appropriate, to be able to do some data processing, information collection, visualization to operators who might be disconnected from maybe a central node. One of the things that we look about is, think about telemedicine. If you're not able to do telemedicine do battlefield triage via telemedicine, how do you develop some AI or intelligent agents on some kind of a platform that can execute at the edge some of that data processing and analytics that you would need to be able to do some triaging? Over.
Okay, thorough answer. Thank you. And then it looks like we have two more for Dr. Naik. This one is, a lot of the research you're doing is very exciting. What topics do you foresee working on next? What projects?
So the digital twin is just something we've started. That is going to continue to grow. That's where we're going to be emphasizing quite a bit on. We're doing a lot of work on stuff in the biospace, mainly on developing what I call some of the molecular stressors, using pluripotent stem cells and developing tissues and organs, and then using that to understand at the individual level what those operational stresses would be. Those are some very new areas of research that we have taken on. One that we've kicked off along with collaboration with MIT Lincoln Labs, Microsoft, Teledyne, and a few others, is what we call our individualized Neuro learning platform, where it's a closed loop environment where we are getting signals from the brain, doing virtual reality to sort of develop tailored training scenarios based on the uptake of information and increasing the plasticity of the brain. Lots of data requirements in that space, ability to pipe in data from different areas to process. That is a program we just kicked off last year. Over.
Exciting and fascinating work ahead for sure. And then the last one, Dr.
Hey, Ryan, I think I lost voice.
Okay, we can still hear you. I think we may have lost Colonel Kehoe.
Hey, Colonel Kehoe here.
Okay.
Do you have me now?
Yeah.
Do you have me back? All right. The last question for Dr. Naik was, what are some of the pain points that in receiving feedback or execution from the other orgs that are not data ready? Again? Okay, we may have lost contact with Dr. Naik. Let's transition over to Q&A for the Vault team. The first one was, what is the opportunity for the vendor community here? We are excited about your fabulous new capability as deep learning experts in the DoD environment.
Yeah, great. So Colonel Vasquez again here. Lots of opportunity there. The first thing I always tell vendors, if they're not already in there, right, is to get a sponsor, right? In other words, if you have a community out there, I don't know, security forces or whoever, that looking at capability, whatever, and you have that, right? And you go to them and they're like, yeah, we like this. We want to deploy something like this. Well, then they come to us, right? We do the use case. We do a BYOT, as Marlu had mentioned, bring your own tool. We evaluate it, put it in the, deploy it into the environment, and voila, you're using that tool set, right? So there's different ways for the vendor community to get involved. That's one way. CIBR is really a big way. That program, which is run by AppWorks, right, that can do the capability, give you opportunity to bid on capabilities that are folks that are putting out there. AppWorks has a very good website that shows what they're looking for, what the Air Force is looking for, et cetera, and you can bid on those as they come through. And then, of course, again, if those CIBR contracts come through and they want to use something like the Vault platform, then we go through that same process again and get those engaged. So those are a couple of ways to do it, through the CIBR process, through getting a sponsor based out, out there looking for capability, specific capability and tools and those type of things. Over.
Okay, thank you, Colonel Vasquez. The next question I think we may have answered in the chat session already is, where can we find a link to register for the AMAs? And if you look down through the chat links, it looks like a contact email address was provided. You could email that individual, Kathleen, and she will make sure you get the logistics that you need. The next question for the Vault team is, are there any data sets in the Vault that with live feeds in real time?
I'll hand it over to Marla. Marla, you have a lot more insight into that than I do.
Yeah, absolutely. So currently, the data that we have is data at rest. We are working on a use case where we are bringing in real-time streaming data from a couple of different places. So it is not, commonly available yet, but it is something that we are working with a particular use case, and we'll be bringing that kind of to the platform as a whole once we have that worked through. So it won't be very long, but it is not currently available.
Thank you, Marlu. Next question. What is the vision for the Vault in the next year?
Well, we've got a great roadmap out there. I know you didn't get to see all of it, but hopefully some of you will look at it. It shows for the next couple of years what we're doing in the Vault, with the things that Marlu talked about, attribute-based access control, growing the data lake, getting more live feeds, doing more federation, doing more convergence. I mean, there's a lot going on because if folks haven't heard already, there's not going to be 31 data platforms out there, right? There's going to be 6 or 7 data platforms, and we're going to be one of them, right? So folks are converging now, they're federating, those type of things, right? So for the next, obviously, near future, we're going to be doing those type of things, growing the platform in that way, putting more capability in there. And of course, like we talked about earlier, adding that JWICS environment in January of 22 is another huge way forward for that roadmap for the Vault, right, platform. So we'll have, again, Nipper, Sipper, JWICs. We'll have, trifecta there, if you will, because of the type of capability that folks are looking for on the high side, right? And in the black ops and all the other type of things that we're working with those folks, right? So to ensure they also have a platform that they can work on securely and ensure that they can get in there and do what they need to do. So lots of those type of things going on, and we can definitely share the slides, which will have the roadmap and those type of things that I talked about, and a lot of other things that are exciting things that are coming up as well. Over.
Yes, and we will make this available in the very near future. The next question is, does Vault support AI projects or any other advanced tech?
Another great question, and we're early in that. Yes, we do have some AI in there now, some apps that are being used for things like that. But we're really going to be starting in earnest with the AI capability going forward. And I know Callie King is on this call, and we're in the very early stages of getting that going. But to answer your question, the question is yes, we're definitely doing that, because obviously you need data, right, to have good AI, right? You need a lot of data, right? So we're tracking that. We've got initiative of that going on. We do have some of that capability in there now with some other vendors that have their apps in our platform that have some AI built into it. But we're going to be growing that as we go forward as well. Over.
Sir,
Awesome.
if I can augment, this is Chris.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, there's actually some packages and MLflow capability built into Databricks, and we have users taking advantage of that kind of technology now.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Next question. How do I get my data into Vault?
I'll push that over to you, Marlon.
Sure, absolutely. So that depends on whether you are bringing in data that you want in your personal kind of your tenant bucket, or whether it is something that we are interested in bringing into the Vault as a whole. So we have different ways that you are able to bring data in, whether it goes to your tenant bucket or whether it goes to one of the enterprise data lake buckets. We have the ability to have large data sets be brought in through an SFG connection. So we do use this SFG. We also have a bucket to bucket transfer that we are able to do, and we're currently working on APIs to be able to allow people to bring data in and do that federation through APIs. If it is a local bucket or a local resource that you're looking to bring into your private tenant, you're able to do that through Hue if you would like to when you're on the Vault. So we try to offer lots of different connection methods. And then some of how that process happens depends on whether it's going into your tenant bucket or whether it's going into the data lake.
And Marlu, I'll just add, I think that's a really great overview. There's ways to upload data within Trifacta, within Databricks, within Tableau, within Hue directly from users. And we do have a data request on the help desk page. So if there's a data system that you don't see available, you can actually go in there and kick off the acquisition process. And members of our team help support that. Over.
Awesome opportunities there. Okay, the next question. What have been the challenges to adoption of the Vault platform, and what tools or capabilities have been used or requested the most?
I say, what they talked about is Databricks is a big one. We see a lot of Databricks usage in the platform. We can see, the cost, we can see the licensing, we can see who's using what, we can see, the usage of those type of things out there. Databricks is a big one. Trifacta, people use Trifacta as well, but right now Databricks has really taken off. From what I can see, I know Marlo can add to this as well. There's a variety of tools obviously out there that are being used, but when I look out there and we look at our quad charts or whatever we're looking at, we can say, wow, people are using. They're using it quite a bit. Tableau, obviously, huge use in Tableau, gigantic use in Tableau, right? So that's being used a lot throughout the enterprise as well. those are the two big ones that I see. Again, there's a lot of other ones that are being used, but not at the level of those. Marlo, you have anything to add to that? Over.
Just from a perspective, we have several tenants that have done a BYOT, and they have tools like Appian and Neo4j within their tenants that they are using quite extensively. Appian is kind of a low-code capability. So we do have a lot of people that are using, tools that they have specifically requested to have brought in addition to, as Colonel Vasquez mentioned, the enterprise tools that we have. I think the real challenge to adoption for the Vault platform has really just been in getting the word out there that we exist. In the last, I think it's been 4 months, we have doubled our user base and dramatically increased the number of tenants that we have on the Vault. So, I think that the biggest obstacle has just been that, people weren't really aware that we were here. And so we're, getting out and making sure that people do know that we're here and what we have to offer. I think that, Mr. Gilley can speak more to the use case side of things as far as, challenges he's seeing on the adoption of the platform.
Okay, I've seen if Chris was going to have anything to add there. We'll pause one.
Sorry, I was thinking. I think Marlou probably hit the hit the big points there.
Fair enough. Okay, next question. Is there an initiative to make the Vault platform more accessible to non-experts, as you mentioned, to make it even more low code? Is there interest from the Vault program in doing so?
Absolutely. That's really the premise of what we want to do, right? Again, like I said, we're not trying to make everybody a data scientist, but man, we want to make everybody a data, literate person, and the more people we can get in there, the better, right? Again, I'm a former security forces, so I can say this, right? The security forces, they use their own folks to do their own data, right? So they may get a security forces member said, hey, we want you to do some data for us. So they're not going out there and necessarily hiring a lot of folks. They're just getting somebody that's really good at data, a security forces member, and they're learning how to do it, right? So we definitely take that. And right now, I think I saw there was somebody put the links in there. I think Chris put it in there. You can sign up for an account right now. Doesn't matter what your technical expertise is. You can go in there, browse around, look around what's in there, right? And explore. And definitely, try to, get smarter in some of the things that we're doing in there. And of course, we make that available to folks like that as well. So this is not just an all technical environment, right? We want it to be user friendly for all comers, if you will, right? So if you're not a great coder, but you could use an application out there that has been mentioned, such as a no code or low code application, then we want you to use it. Right? We want you to learn how to use it. We want you to use it in the experiment. We do, again, Chris talked about use cases, but we also do, if you will, 60-day trials, right? We'll give you some space. We'll give you, an EC2 environment. We'll give you an S3 bucket, and you go out there and play around for a couple of months and say, hey, is this something we want to do? And, go to your leadership, et cetera, and say, hey, this is probably something we can grow here. Then we have those discussions, right? So definitely, yes, it's for that community as well. It's not just for technical people. Over.
So speaking of the community and not just technical, so the AMAs that you guys host, are they open to the general public?
Well, I don't know. Well, it just depends what you say about general public, but we do have contractors in there. We do have vendors in there, and of course, a lot of Air Force members. But we do want to control some of the things, so we don't want to get, even though we're not using Zoom. What are we using? We're using Merlot. We're using another product. Anyway, we don't. Yeah, we don't want to get bombed. Is what I'm saying, right? So we're really careful on who's coming in and those type of things because we don't want just anybody in there. So right. That's why we gave the address of Marlou to kind of vet who's coming in, et cetera. So we don't just open it up to the general public because there are some things we talk about in there that really don't want to be out to the whole general public. But for the folks that have interest, that vendors, contractors, et cetera, then yes, we do that. Over.
Okay, sure. So if they would be appropriate to be dialed into this this meeting, then they would be welcome to join the
That's
AMAs as
correct.
well.
That is
Okay,
correct.
perfect. Okay, and then you were speaking of your former security forces. We do have a question here. Former security forces individual with TAS and ESS for AT work. My question is about who is holding workshops to bring the organization up to date on ML and data mining capabilities.
Well, I don't know about workshops, but we do have, meetings a few times a year to talk about obviously the data capabilities and those type of things. We just had our data summit in February of this year, and some of these topics come up, and we do have these forums as we go along. We also have a data, what we call a DAF dog, Department of the Air Force Data Architecture Working Group. That can be talked about during those type of things. We also have an API working group. So we do have lots of working groups from folks it's comprised of folks out in the field and the MAGCOMs and separate operating agencies, et cetera, because that's where we want the input, right? So we're not going to make decisions at the headquarters level, say, do as we say. We're going to say, what do you think we should be doing? Push that up, and we look at it, we discuss, and decide, what's in the best interest of the of the DAF when we're looking at, either ML, data mining, data or other capabilities, right? So as we get those out, we can socialize those. But right now we do have, again, the DAF dog that we hold every month, and the same person that is on there, Kate Huffnagel, is the contact. She's the secretariat for that, a contact person. If you want to join the DAF dog and hear what we're saying and get involved in that, then you're welcome to do that as well with that same contact person. Over.
Okay, the next question is, who owns the data once it enters the vault? Or more generally, how is the data governance handled? Are there Air Force or DoD policies being used to define the governance?
That's a great question. Yes, there are some policies and things out there, especially at the DoD level. There's DoDs out there and things like that. But we're breaking through those, So a good example is DFAS, right? Defense Finance Accounting Service, right? So that's a DoD entity. However, we do a lot of work with them because what the DFAS folks are saying is that we can't have all these folks coming to us asking for all these, data connections, all these Air Force customers, et cetera. We want to make you the authoritative data reference. And that way they can get it from you. And then, so we're quickly becoming a one-stop shop for a lot of these authoritative data sources, right? And we're becoming the authoritative data reference, right? So they can hook into us and grab the same data they would have grabbed from DFAS, except in this case, it's a one-stop shop. Because DFAS says we're not going to make 18 or 20 different connections to these folks. Why don't they just do it with you guys? So we're doing that with them. We're doing that with others, right? We're doing federating with the DoD, Advana, et cetera, those type of things, right? So it gets kind of sticky because of the policies that are out there, where you can get the data from, who owns the data. But I can tell you, Air Force data is owned by the Air Force, right? It's not owned by a specific entity. It's not owned by security forces or AFIMSC. It's owned by the Air Force. So once it's in the data lake, right, we're doing that with others, right? We're doing federating with the DoD, Advana, et cetera, those type of things, right? So it gets kind of sticky because of the policies that are out there, where you can get the data from, who owns the data. But I can tell you, Air Force data is owned by the Air Force, right? It's not owned by a specific entity. It's not owned by security forces or AFIMSC. It's owned by the Air Force. So once it's in the data lake, right, in the vault, we can look at that and say, okay, who else, do they have a need to access this data? And if they do, then you get it, right? If you don't, then you don't. So, but we're not like, well, we need to go ask permission to do this, right? So we're looking at, breaking down these silos of the data sharing and those type of things so we can have the data more accessible, right? That's a whole purpose of the vault, is to make sure it's a visible, accessible, et cetera, right? So we're working through those, but yes, there's some policies out there that our policy group, I don't think anybody's on from that group on the call right now, that looks at that reviews the DoDs and those type of things to ensure that we are in compliance with those type of policies that are in place. But we try to work through those to ensure that folks get the data that they need. Over.
Okay, I think we have two more questions, and then we'll wrap it up for the day. This next question is for Sibber. Would Vault consider being a sponsor if it makes sense?
I think if it makes sense, but remember, when you do Sibber, you need a sponsor and then you need a customer, right? So it's not just, you can't just have a sponsor letter signed by SAF CEO and say, hey, let's do Sibber, because you got to have a customer to go along with that. So yes, if it makes sense, we'll look at it like, who's your customer? What are they looking to do? What, we got to go through that whole process and seeing what capability is being embedded out there from AppWorks, for example, that you're bidding on in Sibber, to see would it be a good fit for us to be a sponsor, and depending on who the customer is, to see if it's something that that we can do, right? So we look at those, and again, we may say, well, let's do a use case first, on the Sibber, because that funding's there for that. And if it works out fine, you go to the different phase. If it doesn't, then it doesn't go any further, right? So that's the whole beauty of the Sibber program, is you can start off with specific phases and either go forward or not go forward based on the prototypes or whatever it is we're doing for that. But to answer your question, I know it's not a direct answer, but it depends, because it depends on that customer as well, because you have to have two signatures on that Sibber document, the customer and the sponsor. Over.
Indeed. Okay. Next question was, and I think we've kind of asked this one already, but maybe just in a more from a DAF perspective, who is helping organizations with processes to become more aware of the data acquisition process and ultimately feed that data into the Vault?
There's a lot of folks involved in that process. We're obviously one of them. We want to make sure that folks are aware of what, for example, what we have, which is why we do the AMAs. Here's what data we have, and then why we have that request on our, help button, if you will, on the web top to say, hey, I see you don't have this data and we're really looking for it. What can you do to help us get it, right? And then we go through that process to get whatever data that is that you're looking for, right? So we really try to, look at that acquisition process to see, who it is, who owns it, how do we get to it. A good example of this is DHA, right? The Defense Health Agency. Totally different entity. It's a DoD entity. It's medical data, right? So we have to look at that. Okay, how can we acquire specific data that we're looking for? For example, let's say it was for readiness, right? For medical readiness in this example, right? So we'd have to look at that. We'd have to help that organization with that process on getting whatever data they were looking for to do that. Or we say, does that already exist somewhere else? So for example, ASIM's data, right, which is medical data from DHA, well, PBH already has that, right? So we have to look and say, they already have it. We can get a connector to that and do it that way. And that way we don't have, it may already exist out there. You can get it through us via, those channels. Or if it doesn't exist, then we go through the other channel as far as requesting it, going through the wickets of getting it. Because we've done this with everything we've gotten, we've had to do that, right? We've had to break down those silos, break down barriers, people saying, no, you cannot have this data, blah, 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 right? And then we ended up getting the data. So we've been very successful in doing those type of things, because of the capability that it's going to bring. And again, like I said, who owns the data? In that case, DHA owns the data, right? So it's a DoD entity, not an Air Force entity. Even though they're Air Force members, the data is still owned by DHA. So we have to play nice with them, get a data sharing agreement, and get it, federated so that other folks within the DAF can use that. So we're involved in it, but there's others that are involved in that process as well. Over.
Okay, and then as you were discussing that answer, I also thought about the so we have summits with the MAGCOM CDOs where we talk about what we're trying to do as an Air Force and what they're trying to do at their local MAGCOMs, and then I would assume that the MAGCOM CDOs work with their internal organizations. Is that correct?
That's correct. And then we also have a DAF data board, separate from the DAF dog. Okay, so the data board, you have, again, all the MAGCOM data officers, the SOA data officers, those type of folks, right, that are all collaborating, on the same DoD data strategy, to ensure that we're aligning and that we're not out there, in the wild, wild west doing whatever we need to do. So, talking about APIs, talking about tools, talking about platforms and those type of things, right? So all that comes together, and that's where that's communicated as well. So that everybody how are we doing that? Or somebody out there, we need this data, who else has it, right? So that we communicate, and that's a once a month meeting as well as the DAF dog, to try to get everybody on the same page under the SAF CDO to say, here's the direction that we're, to make sure we all stay on the same page, because there's only one data strategy, right? And that's the DoD data strategy. If you don't have a copy of that, we can get that to you, right? But it lays out the data strategy for the DoD for all the services, and the DAF follows that. And we ensure that, all our folks have that. So MAGCOMs should not be creating their own DoD data, their own data strategy. They can have other things that they're doing for data, but as far as a data strategy, as long as they're aligning with the DoD, then they're good to go. They can have plans and all the other type of things, but when you look at the strategy, we all align to one. Over.
Okay, and speaking of the dog, there was a question that came in about whether or not the dog is open to the vendor community.
I don't think, Marlo, can you help me? I don't think so. Contractors, yes.
Contractors, yes.
But I don't think we're opening it up to vendors. Marlo, do you remember?
That is correct, sir.
Yeah, just contractors, but at this point, not vendors, because a lot of things we talk about in there, tools and things like that. Yeah, right.
Makes sense. Okay, and then there was one last question that came in that I thought was a pretty good one. We have a few minutes left before our time is up. So we'll make this the last question. Can you discuss a bit of the relationship between Vault and data.gov? How do you balance open data practices with security requirements?
Oh, that's great, because when you look at the Vault, that's a great question. Obviously we're behind the DISA cap, which means it's not open to the public, right? So, but we are also standing up, and I know Callie King and others are on this call as well, that are also leading that effort, where we will have an open data site for the public to, and they will be able to look at data sets, et cetera, that we provide out there as well. So they will be separate, right? So they won't be integrated. There will be separate entities there of things that should be, by definition of the law of the Open Data Act, right? That we are developing that, and it will be out there. As a matter of fact, there's already a website out there, and I guess it is the data.gov, right? I'm not sure, Callie. I'm not sure. I don't remember the website off the top of my head right now. There it is. Thank you, Callie. Data.af.mil. So if the folks can look at that, right, that's going to be our open data platform, if you will, where we will be providing that data once we get that all up and running, but we're currently working on that. So that's kind of the balance. It's not going to integrate with the Vault, for example, in this case, because it's separate and apart, right? Because we're behind the DISA cap for a reason. But the things that are required by law will be out there on that data.af.mil for the Air Force data that we're supposed to be sharing, right? We're not responsible for all the other DoD data, and the other services. That's their responsibility. Our responsibility is within the DAF, and that's why we have the data.af.mil stood up, so we can get that DAF data out there as required, and of course have those security practices in place, et cetera, of how we use that on the platform and what tool we use that on the platform. CCAN is a big tool that's used out there by a lot of entities for open data. We're looking at that. But again, we're looking at right now, and if we use a tool like CCAN, we have to make sure it's hardened. We have to make sure that all the security practices are in place before we do that. So we're in the process of doing that on the open data side. So I hope that answers the question. Over.
Great answer. Thank you. So we're just a couple minutes left here. So I just want to take a moment to thank Dr. Naik and thank the Vault Data Platform team for joining us today and sharing your amazing advancements with us, helping us to, as we said before, cross-pollinate our successes and learn from our failures as well as we work towards those successes. But this will conclude today's Innovation Connect. Our next Innovation Connect is scheduled for the 12th of August August, where we'll highlight the coastal storm technologies from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Research and Development Center and the U.S. Naval Research Laboratory. We also look forward to continuing to host these events in the future. We'd like to do them every month, and we'd love to hear from you on any projects you would have that you would like to see highlighted in the future. Just give us a call, and we can set up a time, a date for you to present. So I want to thank all of you for taking the time to attend today's program. Since our inaugural Innovation Connect in August of 2020, we've had significant participation and attendance at each of our monthly events. It is not without help from all of our other DoD innovators that Innovation Connect has become a success. Videos of today's events and our other Innovation Connect events will be published on the Department of the Air Force CDO YouTube page. And for more information on future events and registration, please follow our LinkedIn and Twitter accounts. If you have any excellent ideas for Innovation Connect, please send those recommendations to Ms. Ty Daniel, and our team will review your proposal, as I discussed just briefly earlier. And with that, I wish everyone a good afternoon and a good night, and we look forward to seeing you again next month.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Out here.